Good morning, Joe Wennberg, Bullbird Summer 4. Today, the day following a a trip to Philadelphia uh, at the Eastern Penitentiary, prison they call it. Looks like an early 18th century structure, maybe later, middle, I don't know, 19th century, 19, let me get that straight. And they usually have these antique fairs on all four streets that surround this prison. And I was there, and a bunch of my paintings were there with me. My wife was there with her antiques, and lots of other people. Over the years, we've come to know some of these people. An individual by the name of Tony Soprano runs the whole affair, and it's quite a shindig for one individual. Well, I guess he has some help to run that thing, and he runs a couple other things throughout Philadelphia. And but my main interest today is to make a video that I could put up on YouTube right away in an attempt to try to correct a defect that I've been noticing for a while now. I don't get any notifications that somebody's trying to make a comment. In the beginning, when I started Bluebird on YouTube, I used to get comments. Now I don't get them anymore. So I started looking into it a while back, and yeah, I think I know what the bug is. So in homage to all those maniacs in computer science world, I'm going to try to change a setting when I tape this and put it up on YouTube and see if I start getting contacts. That being said, there's two thrusts on this video. One is I want to show some paintings of mine. There was a fairly enthusiastic response to the paintings I had out there yesterday, and it's not surprising because I could see people being attracted to them. They're quite different. They're striking. But it may not be everybody's cup of tea. But it seems like certain people do like it, and they talk to me about them, and so on and so forth, which is very pleasing. And it's hard for me to hold my enthusiasm back when that happens. But be that as it may, I'm going to show maybe 10, 12 paintings. These were not at Philadelphia yesterday. And when that's done, I'm going to try to do a brief comment on a book that I'm reading before the information is no longer at my fingertips. So those two things. So we'll get started with the paintings, and in no particular order. We're just putting them up there. So this one, as you can see, well, maybe you can't, but what it's supposed to represent is there's a fairly well-known desert due east of Afghanistan in Central Asia, and it's called the Tamakulan Desert. And I've talked about this before, and the gold represents the desert. And the desert would be coming from what's on the screen, right to left, out of a tongue of land in the eastern part of Afghanistan, maybe a tongue of land no more than 50 miles wide, maybe a couple of hundred or a couple hundred miles long, and then the desert starts. Now, on top of the desert, there's representation of mountains and snow-capped peaks and so on. Now, also, this one was put together during the the Silk Road project, and supposedly, if Marco Polo, I think he walked around that desert. He didn't go through it because theoretically, if you go into that desert, you don't come out. So here's another small painting, which is just a painting of two figures with part of my name prominently displayed at the bottom. I'm going to try to leave them up long enough so you can look at them. Okay, so that's a couple figures. And then I have one which is another small painting. And this would be a representation of a man riding a horse. As you can see, I think, maybe. All right, enough of the horse. And I have one that is fairly abstract, but I'm sure it represents some sort of landscape, and with figures off to the left and dispersed in the painting itself. So that's this painting. Okay. And then next, we have this painting, which is fairly large. Let's see if I can get the whole thing on the screen. Fairly large. And let me do something that might enhance its presentation. I'll shut this other light off. It seems to be glaring on the painting. Shut my piano light off and start again with this fairly large painting of mine. Not that large, I mean, obviously people make a lot larger paintings, but so you get most of it. I got light coming in from the window, which is not helping here, but what are you going to do? Now this was this was made shortly after I made a painting, which I'm not showing today. It's a bit larger than this, a bit larger, and it would be the first, that one I'm talking about would be the first that set me off in this direction of a type of painting. And someday I will show that. But this followed, and another one like this followed. And the rest, as they say, is history. But history being history, this, from those, these emerged. Also still having that light problem, but I think you get the drift. So I could orient the painting in a certain direction. I'll get less glare, and the color should stand out better. So this is, I went off in that direction, as you'll note, and I wasn't quite at where I am now, but in this one I start getting closer to that. And so on and so forth. So, certainly following right along, making more and more paintings in that kind of style, you might say. Just trying to get the glare off these paintings. So here's one which is showing up a little better on the screen. I don't know why, maybe because there might be a reason if I dig into it, but it just seems to show up better, less glare. So, and while I'm showing you these, I mean, it should be obvious that this is all self-taught art. Never went through 1 minute of training. Maybe it's obvious, but just pointing that out, that I would be what they call a non-academic artist. Non-academic, never trained, never studied. The only studying I do is I read books about the artists, and if a film comes up like Mr. Turner or Pollock, I'll watch it. And by the way, Turner is more or less my number one artist from the past. He's spectacular. And I was up close and personal with Turner at the New York City Metropolitan Museum of Art. Got real close. You could do it in those days. You can't do it anymore. They put up barriers to prevent you from being close to the paintings. And but I was able to get real close, look at the work, and noticing certain attributes of his paintings. And by the way, this painting, I wanted to mention that yesterday at that Philadelphia thing, a young lady, I won't mention her name, but she watches these things once in a while. She'll know what I'm talking about, but she showed me a painting with these lines or hatch marks over the painting itself. And she asked me if I liked it, and I said, no, I really don't, knowing full well that I did something similar years ago. And I'm not even sure I like what I did, but this is, if you're watching, Miss, I'll hold back your name. That's what I was thinking of when you showed me that painting yesterday. Here's another one. This one goes directly to the style of art that came out of that original one I talked about. As you can see, I've gone to a very swirling technique. And I do love the colors. I'm not going to do anything I don't love. I got to love it, right? I won't waste my time. You know, they got all these rules how you make a modern painting, and you got to have this and you got to have that. Well, listen, if you don't love it, throw it away. It's not worth a dime. So this is getting me off. This is probably a couple of years after the one large painting that started all of this. So that was that. And I think I have one more. Maybe two more. So here we go. This was probably during the Russian project, and I think I have three from the Russian project. One is a very snowy looking landscape with the onion domes and women, the faces of women in the onion domes that are dispersed throughout the painting. So, in one of those onion dome palaces, that was the other painting. The other, and I say I got three. There's this one. This one is called Sable, Wrapped in Sable. Big fur industry, country, Russia, particularly years back. Although I think they're still involved in the fur trade. Anyway, and then there was a third one. It was called the Malachite Room. The Malachite Room is this fabulous place in one of the palaces over there in either Petersburg or Moscow. That's the walls, the pillars, the columns are all made out of malachite, polished, highly polished stone. Of course, malachite is the stone that we get copper from. So there's this big malachite room. The tables, everything is made out of that stone. So the painting, rather than being about the stone, it's about three ladies, Victorian ladies, and their costumes, very colorful, but there's an accent of green to try to make the concept of malachite come through. So that would be the three paintings for the Russian project. And that, folks, no, there's one more. There's one more I'm going to show you. And this one, I haven't given it a name, so we can call it whatever we like. But this was a pretty common motif of mine over the days. So I guess you see that. Okay, so that's the paintings. So now let's get into the book. And why am I so concerned about this book? It's because, I'm not finished reading it. I'm almost finished. I mean, I could close the book and consider it done, but, and I want to get these ideas out before they're not at the tip of my fingers. And these ideas are, well, the book that I'm talking about is one that's called The Fringes of Power, and I have mentioned this before. The Fringes of Power by somebody named John Colville. And it's all about how he spent World War II being Winston Churchill's private secretary. So what you get is all the back room activities that went on during that war, all the backroom activities, and so it doesn't read like your typical war book. They brought in these 8 inches, and then they brought in the 12 inches, and then the Panzers and the Blitzkrieg and all that nonsense. He's talking pretty much about human lives at the very top. At the very top, of course. But it doesn't come across as an aristocratic style of writing or narrative. It just comes because it's a diary. He decided to keep this early in the war, and he writes clear through. I mean, right now, I'm in 1945. Basically, the Germans are really giving up because they got their butts kicked earlier than these dates that I'm reading now. But, they were scattered throughout Europe, and they didn't give up en masse. The Allies had to go beat them down all over the place. But eventually, then that's about where I'm at now. So, but what I find, the only thing I give it merit, basically, because it really shows, without any cover-up, how the aristocrats lived through the war. While everybody else was more or less starving and living in frigid, broken down, bombed out shelters, the aristocrats were pretty much living the same old lives they lived all the time. And once in a while, they had to run into a shelter, And many of the aristocrats lost sons and fathers in the war. And those guys loved to be pilots, so they were getting blown out of the skies all over the place. So that comes across pretty clearly. But one of the things other writers bring up is the fact that how did people eat during the war? And of course, we know there was rationing going on. So one instance in all of this, well, and maybe I came across a few others that were less accentuated, but one instance where the Churchills had to eat more or less regular fare talks about how their meat rationing was kind of skimpy. And so thus the meal that they had wasn't that robust. But in the meantime, day after day after day, these people ate at the finest restaurants in the land. Okay? So the finest restaurants in the land were getting the food, the quality champagne, the quality claret, the quality brandy, and so on. So they never skipped a beat, the aristocrats. Never. Well, everybody else was more or less at the brink of starving or freezing or some other way of getting close to death. The aristocrats were eating their stomachs out. They were disinclined to ever move into that arena of less abundance. They were not going to step down to where they were deprived. Okay, like I said, I came across one reference. Their meat allotment was getting sly. Look, there's no two ways about it. The societies are just so divided between the haves and the haves not. Continues today. It'll go on forever. I don't see any way around it. Because one of my pet philosophies is that power doesn't give up power. Power will do anything it can to keep power. That's why I find the American Civil War to be an anomaly, because why would the South give up power? It just doesn't make sense. So I believe there's more there than we really know about. And But that's what I wanted to say about this book. Very good read, by the way. Colville, you'll never be able to nail him down. You don't know where his heart is. You just won't nail this guy down. But all the characters of the British ruling classes are in there with very good footnotes. If a name comes up on a page and that name hasn't been talked up before, there's a footnote. Totally. So there's got to be like 200, 300 footnotes in this book. But it's easy reading. I think from a World War II perspective, if you don't read this, you will never really understand how it was in World War II. Wonderful descriptions of the Battle of Britain and the Blitzkriegs, whatever it was, the bombing of London. Very good, very, very good. So if you're at all interested in World War II, try to get away from the standard take on that piece of history and read this The Fringe of Power. The only other thing I'll mention about books is that I know a talk or two back, I said I would be reading about John Adams, and I said that I was going to put him in the plus column. And I'm going to continue to do that, and there's no doubt about it. These people were living in a totally different world than we are. Totally different world. But there was a very skinny band of aristocracy in early America, and they ruled the roost, and they set the yeoman and the farmer and all these guys to the war to get a bullet in them. Okay? That's what they did. They had their militia. The militia commanders and captains had a tight grip on those who had to join the militia. You had to join the militia. And if you didn't come to muster, they'd come after you. Okay? So it's not all what it's cracked up to be. Okay? You got to dig in to find out what's going on. And of course, John Adams did have a commanding position in the militia of his time. And so this book uncovers that for me, but I'm still going to be on his side because, like I said, they lived in a totally different philosophy. Totally different philosophy. There's just no way they didn't think it was right that these people of special privilege had every right to put their foot on the throats of the common, ordinary people. You see it in their talk and how they mention these people. So that's the way they lived then. And, listen, it's pretty much the way they still live. But I really, listen, I love my life. I'm not having a beef with any of these politicians. Who cares? I could care less about these people. They're the ones that got to care about themselves, and look themselves in the mirror every morning. I don't. I look at trees. I look at birds. I read some books. I make some paintings. I don't care what these people who hate others and kill them in the name of security for the nation. The nation has to be secure. We have to kill everybody. That's their motto. That's the way they go. If you look at how they beat their way into the Philippines, okay, and made that country subject to them, and they would justify it all the time. Now I'm getting off target, but that's what they always did. That's what they always do. Not just the United States, all the countries. They beat their way into these countries, beat them into submission, and then they make it look at that it's perfectly right thing to do. Whether it was the British beating down South Africa, or the British beating down India, or the French beating down Indochina, or the Japanese beating down Indochina and China and Micronesia, whatever power it was, beatdowns were with all the rage, all the rage. And there's no way a person who believes in justice, I don't want to say justice, but believes in moral behavior can get behind beatdowns. There's no justification for beatdowns. The only justification is if the guy's got the gun or the knife right up against you, then you can beat that guy down. But other than that, making these philosophical statements about spheres of influence, and if we don't get them now, they're going to get us later, so we're going to go kill them all. This cannot be justified. Cannot be. And nobody's ever tried a different way, so you can't say that a different way would have ever worked. We don't know. It's always been kill, 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 and we could start a little football cheer there, couldn't we? And then, of course, you'd be shut down if you did that. But I don't care. You go, look at the Peloponnesian Wars, Alexander the Great, Hannibal, Julius Caesar, so on and so forth. And, and all the killing and the battles that were going on in the so-called Dark Ages throughout Europe, throughout England. I mean, it was nothing but kill, 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 constantly, right up to the present day, 20th century, 21st century. We got some killing going on in the 21st century. What's interesting, though, is that the ability to control the activities that are going on in the world has increased by a large margin. So that whereas in 1940, what was going on was reported in the press. Now, a lot of that was slanted, but enough got through that if you could filter it correctly, and that's a big if, because you would have to know something about the world to be able to filter it correctly. But you would have known about the concentration camps. You would have known about what was going on in the Middle East, what was going on in the Baltics, what was going on all over the place. In Russia, you would have known what was going on, regardless of how the press was presenting it, okay? Because there would be enough true reporting that if you were really paying attention, you could filter it all out. Today, I'm sorry to say, I don't see that. I just don't see it. I see, talking heads who just are not getting it. They're just not getting it. That they're puppets. They're not brilliant people. They're nobodies who are doing their master's work for them. The masters all hide out somewhere, They're not putting their neck on the line. So anyway, I've said enough. You saw my paintings. I'm going to put this up there, and hopefully I'll make the change to the setting that was preventing people from posting a comment. And theoretically, if people post a comment, I theoretically should get an email. Theoretically. But we'll see. That's the way it used to work in the beginning with YouTube. But then all of a sudden it went away. That may have been partly my fault, but, I will admit that. That could have been partly my fault by starting with a new setting when I was setting up a video. All right, well, listen, enjoy the day. I hope I didn't bore you to death. And if you see some paintings and you like them, please comment and tell me which ones you like. I love reading about myself. No, I'm kidding you. But let's see if this comment thing really works. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.